Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. And keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy. All right, folks, here we are on Thursday, December 12th. We're going to take a look at EMKR today. So EMCORE was suggested by a watcher on the channel. If you have any tickers that you'd like me to take a look at, just leave them in the comments below. I keep a good eye out for those. So I came in and took a look at EMCORE. I mean, it's been a wild ride lately. If you zoom in here, this plus 82% day just happened on September 30th. And you see, like, the volume shot up, right, to 31 million. And then the next day it died down to 3.8 million. And then it continued to die down to 1.5 million and has sort of stuck there or well below a million for quite a period of time. But it did hold that gain and didn't come down into this gap that it created at all. And then it did another huge gap up just on November 8th and had a plus 28% day. Their volume only coming up to just shy of 5 million, and then again very quickly dying down to about half of that, and then pinning itself just in the couple hundreds of thousands or less for many days thereafter. So sort of an interesting situation here, and again, it didn't come down and do any meaningful fill of the gap that it had left up there either. So luckily there's a bunch of price action to go off of. This is the longer tail of EMCORE, and so there's a sight to behold there, including this reverse split that you have here that happened just in April, and and then we get these jumpy recent situations. So we'll see how it evolves, but there is, thankfully a lot of price action to go off of. So if we zoom in to just sort of like intraday, very near-term stuff, obviously the chart looks pretty ugly because of the volume that we just talked about, but to me the most critical level right now is this 299 that we pulled. That to me looks like the key to sort of preserving this most recent move and then maybe providing, I don't know if it'll be in the near term or if it'll take some period of time, the opportunity for another big leapfrog like we've seen. I don't know if things will start to kind of smooth out over time as well and look more like a sustained bullish, I don't even want to say run, but just bullish movement, because this like jump and then consolidate and jump and then consolidate, it's bizarre. But being that the volume comes in fast and furious and then sort of recenters itself at relatively low volume and then jumps up again, that's obviously what this is going to end up looking like. But I don't know how long that sustains for. So 299 critical level as far as I see it. If it does start to get some movement to the upside, 313 would be the place where I'd look for it to get some initial resistance. Again, if it's doing sort of like a traditional type motion, not if it does this like leapfrog. I'll talk about those levels in a moment. And then if it comes down, it's touched this and come close to it, several times. 286 is the level that I'd look for it to continue to hold or for buyers to continue to step in and scoop it up if it's going to not get into this gap any further. If it does, 262 and then 244 could come into play, maybe ultimately resulting in a gap fill, which I guess would happen at 240. And then if it does something dippier or sort of like leaps a bunch of these levels to the downside and has a big downturn, that's why I put these here, 217 and then 143. Obviously there's probably something around here like 186 or so, but there's relatively thin price action to go off of, so I didn't put that in. I just put this 143 as sort of like a far away number to the downside because things have been so volatile. I thought I would toss that in there just as a, hey, if things get really volatile to the downside, like maybe this is what that would look like. Similarly to the upside, right? So if it does decide to leapfrog and it doesn't just toy with these levels between like 286 and 313, and it gets jumpy to the upside again, 345, 370. Those both look like potential targets to me. Or if it wants to get even jumpier, or if it does settle in that range and then jumps again, 440 and 5. I would say there are certainly some levels between 370 and 440, probably like 403 or so here, maybe even a little less. Yeah, probably here, like just shy of 4, so like 396, 397. I didn't put it in because, first of all, these are farther away targets, and second of all, that is a slightly less strong level as far as I see it than the 440. So I sort of tried to put, when I got further out, the like more solid price targets as far as I can see them for resistance levels. But if it does start to get some traction or action around 4, then we can put in some more granular levels at that time, and I would expect sort of 396, 397 to be one of those. Now, jumping out here to the EMAs, we do see a sort of interesting setup here. It's getting with this recent jump, this recent gap up, it did get everything into a bullish formation, right? It effectively took these short-term bullish crossovers that it had, the 8, 21, and 34, and when it jumped, it got all of those crossover, and it held the 8s, and it held the 21, and it held the 34, but it did test all of them. And of interest, what it did, this 183 that I just drone on and on and on and on about all the time, the 183 EMA and how important it is. What did we see? When it jumped up, it hit that. That's exactly where it hit resistance and kept rejecting, but buyers, even though it got pushed down a bit, buyers kept stepping in and kept pushing it back to the 183, and eventually that just completely gave way, and that wall crumbled. And so up here we get a jump over the 183, and again, testing the 8, now getting very close to testing the 21. Will we see a repeat where it comes down and retests the 34? Maybe. Obviously, it didn't spell doom for it here, right? It also didn't mean, by the time it did test the 34, it was in such a position where the crossovers, the EMA crossovers, didn't turn bullish at all. These two, the 8 and the 21, sort of laid on top of each other, but they didn't cross over into a bearish formation. And so that's, if history is going to repeat itself here, that's sort of what I would look to happen. Now, being that I do think the 183 is super important, if things don't continue to just have these big bounds of gapping up and something more sort of, I don't have a better term for it than traditional, something more standard or traditional starts to take shape, it wouldn't shock me if it comes down and does retest that 183 EMA again, even if it turned these bearish, that if it retested it and it was holding, it was getting good price action off of it, that wouldn't spell doom and gloom to me. But that wouldn't shock me if that were to happen. If it slips it and starts to treat it as resistance, then it might get a little dicey, but that's in the future. Now, volume wise, we do see some decent volume shelf up here because the volume is so generally thin, and then on these huge gap ups the volume comes in so hot and heavy, so there is actually a big shelf up here that it's kind of in the midst of right now. So we'll see if that holds. If not, it does get a little volume wise, just talking about volume wise, it does get a little volume gappy until you get back down here into like the 230 range. So will it need to come down and essentially that would result in filling this gap, right? And then bounce off of the shelf, maybe. But we'll see. It's doing relatively nothing at the moment because that volume has once again all dried up. And so we're sort of just dealing with this sit and wait type situation, which is where it had been in, when it previously gapped up, and we see the results from what happened there. I do want to see, and also at this point, I mean, it's going to depend on what you think the psychology of this is. So 96.78% of shares showing as being profitable at the moment. That's as long as Webull's accounting for this correctly with the reverse split and everything, that makes me question this a little bit, but maybe this is correct. But it'll be interesting to see how folks treat this based off of that. No large scale orders coming in, so we'll see. On the think or swim side of things, here it's sort of like, it's interesting because these gap ups look sort of like luxuriously smooth on this think or swim setup. We do see good callouts by the TTM squeeze indicator. So let's like look at that for a moment, because that might tell us something. I don't know. It's not that it happened, it's not going to work 100% of the time, but we see a pretty lengthy trigger here. And that whole period of time, the price action was situated at the base ATR. So the ATR that's situated between the call trigger and the put trigger. It was situated there, and almost that whole time, it was triggering on the TTM squeeze indicator. It fired a few days before, right? You see this is, I don't know, what is this, 3 or 4 candles before that huge gap up. So really interesting call out there by the TTM squeeze indicator. And then what happened there? So then we get into the next set of ATR levels. This is the ATR setup for October, right? All of these are a month-long period. Again, situates at the base ATR, right between the call and the put trigger. Nothing really happening. 3 candle trigger. And then it fires for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 trading days. And then it gaps up again, up above the call trigger. And then it just sort of settles in, and now is once again in December on the base ATR. And now we are 5 candles. I feel like I'm talking myself into taking an EMKR position as I'm saying this. But we're 5 candles in to a trigger, and we see what happened the last 2 times. Does history have to repeat itself? Of course not. But it is interesting that this setup sort of keeps happening in recent months, and 2 of 2 the last 2 months has resulted in the same thing. So can it make it 3 of 3? I don't know, but it is an interesting sort of setup as far as that's concerned. If history were to like literally repeat itself, there would be fair warning, right? There would be the trigger, and then the volume continues to stay flat while it fires, and then the gap up happens. You get the trigger, the volume stays flat for an even longer period of time while the TTM squeeze fires, and then you get the big gap up. So, while I do feel sort of jumpy to maybe try a position here, knowing that it's like full gamble mode, I will maybe do my best to try to remember to keep an eye on this and see when it does start to fire. That way, at least, if it jumps or if it plummets or if nothing happens, at least that happens relatively quickly, because who knows, if this trigger takes anything like this period of time, there's several more trading days to put in before it's even going to show its first fire candle. And then you have a few days to wait if history repeats itself. So something to maybe keep an eye on there. It's interesting. All right, folks. So I hope that your trading week has been going well. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.